Welcome, friends. James Corbett here, CorbettReport.com, with this week's edition of Propaganda Watch. And this week we're going to be dissecting a piece that recently aired on Bloomberg. U.S. banks are terrified of Chinese payment apps. Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I hate to spoil the fun. But no, U.S. banks are not terrified of Chinese payment apps, despite what Bloomberg propaganda would have you believe.
In China, people use mobile services owned by Alibaba and Tencent to do almost everything. They chat, shop, send money to each other, and even make purchases in physical stores. And the country is becoming cashless. So here's the scary thing for American finance executives. The banks never get a cut. In fact, many Chinese don't even have bank accounts. China is among the growing number of countries showing that payments can happen cheaply and easily without banks or credit cards.
Etc., etc. Now, if you feel that there's probably more to this story than that feel-good Bloomberg puff piece would have you believe, ooh, the payment apps are coming for the banks, guys, and we're going to have a new utopia where we circumvent the banks and free ourselves from the monetary chains. Well, if you think there's more to this story, then congratulations, you're completely correct. Now, I will, as usual, exhort you to go and watch that full piece from Bloomberg so that you know what the propaganda spiel is, but I think there's a couple of things that we have to note as gigantic red flags on this idea that payment apps are going to come along and save us from the banks. First is that we should not be actively applauding the headlong rush towards the cashless society, where all of our transactions will be stored and analyzed in real time, precisely as the Total Information Awareness Office was explicitly set up to do back a decade and a half ago, before there was the big public outcry that forced it to go underground and basically take all of its ideas and put it into the bowels of the NSA, where we know it is operating to this day. So that is an exceptionally important piece of this puzzle because, of course, with that ability to store, analyze, and personally identify each transaction as it's happening comes enormous power to control people who, well, the powers that shouldn't be want to control, whether that's politically or otherwise. And we see this. This is already happening. As I outlined 3 years ago in my editorial on Choke Point, how the government will control the cashless economy. And there I outlined several precise instances of how people are already being financially wiped off the face of the planet for political wrongthink in this semi-cashless society of today. So can you imagine the cashless world of tomorrow that they are painting as some sort of utopia in this Bloomberg puff piece? This is not the direction we want to be going in, definitively. And secondly, at best, even if things were to play out something like what this the Bloomberg piece is suggesting, that, oh, the banks will be cut out of all of these payment gouging, these fees and transaction fees that they get from all of the payments that are taking place currently, well, all you're really doing is swapping out one money master for another. And in the end, I think they're ultimately manifestations of the same thing. What am I talking about specifically? Well, the idea here is that Alibaba, i.e. the company behind Alipay, or Tencent, i.e. the company behind WeChat, are now going to be the monetary masters of this new cashless payment system paradigm. But who really are these people behind these companies? What are they? And is it going to be better for the people behind those companies to be in charge of the economy and handling our transactions than the banks themselves? Well, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. For those who don't know about this, Alibaba, again, owns Alipay, and Alibaba just happens to be the company behind literal Chinese government propaganda apps. There are such things that not only float around in China, but earlier this year, Alibaba secretly developed, they didn't openly admit this, it had to come out from leaks from within the company, but yes, they developed a Chinese government propaganda app that's designed to encourage the population of China to apply Xi Jinping thought to their daily activities, went viral and became the #1 downloaded app in China. And oh yeah, it was created by Alibaba. A company like Alibaba, which is essentially the Amazon of China, does not come to a position of that kind of prominence unless it plays ball with the Chinese government, unless there is Chinese government backing to it, and unless it backs the Chinese government. And that is abundantly evident from things like that app, but many other connections. Or Tencent, it even gets even more blatant in the case of Tencent, which, again, we're being asked to believe the US banks are looking at this phenomenon in abject terror. Oh no, these companies are taking over our payment processing abilities. Well, who is Tencent? Founded by Pony Ma. The Tencent website used to, formerly, before it was scrubbed and shoved down the memory hole, it used to admit that Ma was a deputy to the 5th Shenzhen Municipal People's Congress and serves in the 12th National People's Congress. I wonder why they scrubbed that from the website, given increased scrutiny of Chinese firms and big tech and their relation to the Chinese government. But it does still admit that President Martin Lau, the president of Tencent, again, behind WeChat, which is one of the main payment app in China, prior to joining Tencent, Martin Lau was, drumroll please, an executive director at Goldman Sachs Asia LLC's investment banking division and the chief operating officer of its telecom media and technology group. So there you go. So ultimately, it is going to be the bankers and their Bilderberg buddies who are already preparing the way for this cashless payment app system of the future rollout in the West. It's already happening through Venmo and PayPal and other things, which we know are intimately tied into the banking system and wouldn't exist without intimate and deep bankster ties of people like PayPal co-founder and Bilderberg attendee Peter Thiel, amongst others. But I mean, that's the kind of rabbit hole that one can easily stumble down when looking through the connections here and seeing that, no, the payment app system of the future is going to be controlled by the same individuals and their bankster buddies. But perhaps even more tellingly is where this is ultimately going. Because this is going to a world in which you are not only surveilled, but actively controlled, and your money is not your own. It is the government's to take as they please at any time they want for any infraction, real or imagined.
Well, you jaywalked and you had facial recognition.
The craziest thing, I actually got this. Yeah, so I was jaywalking in Nanshan, and all of a sudden I got a fine to my WeChat.
Was it instant?
It was about 20 seconds after, I guess. And because I had money in my balance, it just went straight out. And this is just the most incredible thing. It just came straight out.
Didn't even authorize it.
And that was incredible.
That's crazy.
That, right there, is a horrifying story. An absolutely chilling story. This is already happening. The facial recognition camera networks are now automatically tied in with the police, who can then monitor infractions, presumably with some sort of artificial intelligence or what have you, as it's happening, and then automatically take money for a fine. Obviously, no judge, no jury, no trial. They simply pronounce you guilty and take money out of your account as a fine, and it happens in the space of 20 or 30 seconds. That is absolutely terrifying, and that is the world that this type of payment app technology, again administered in central locations by Bilderberg-connected banksters who are obviously tied in with the government, that's the vision of the future for these technocrats. And, oh, irony of ironies, that piece also comes from Bloomberg. So Bloomberg pointing out the absolute horrifying vision of the Chinese state surveillance society when it suits their purposes, but also saying how it'll be a good thing when it suits their purposes. So that's the way the propaganda functions in that sense. And just as a bonus, since we're here in Propaganda Watch, I will also direct people to Jimmy Dore, who covered this particular story recently, but I think did so in an unhelpful way by parroting the Bloomberg headline that banksters are terrified about these Chinese payment apps in the title of his YouTube video, and then spent half of the video simply watching the Bloomberg video without comment, with the only comment being his reactions on screen. Oh, wow, look at this, guys. Hey, Chinese don't have bank accounts. It must be utopia. It takes until well over into half the video has already gone before the first objections are really raised. Well, this might mean just someone like Jeff Bezos or Amazon or what have you might just do this over in the States, and I'm not sure that's going to be a good thing either. So it almost serves to amplify the propaganda to a certain extent before it takes it down, which is unhelpful for an erstwhile alternative media outlet. But again, Jimmy Dore is generally worth listening to on a lot of topics, and he eventually, I think, gets to some of the right answers and objections to this Bloomberg story. But we have to read this carefully and critically, especially when it comes from a bankster-connected outlet like Bloomberg. So this is the story. Long story short, no, the banksters are not terrified of Chinese-style payment apps coming to the US and elsewhere. They are actively involved in helping this process along. And yes, there are going to be transaction fees and things that will be heard along the way, but they will more than gain from that with the new currency in the new economy, because as you know by now, data is the new oil. Where have you heard that before? So, welcome to the nightmare future, brought to you heralded by Bloomberg, as this is going to be some big strike, some blow against the banksters. It is not. Don't fall for the propaganda. This has been your weekly public service announcement from CorbettReport.com. James Corbett here, looking forward to talking to you again very shortly.